Hi, I'm Ken Love.
And I'm Jane Tai.
And together we're part of Hawaii Master Food Preservers. And today we are going to
make two things. We're actually going to make a mango chutney, and we're also going to make a marinara. But the marinara that we're using is not just your basic tomatoes, beefsteak tomatoes. We're also going to add a new fruit or another variety of it called the tree tomato. But before we do any of that, we actually have to...
We're going to clean the table.
Right. Ken will be using actually a bleach solution, which will sanitize the table. And we're using disposable paper towels just so that we know everything is going to be properly clean.
We need to do hand washing. Hand washing is crucial to any step in food preparation and food preservation. So we're going to wash, and some people sing happy birthday when they wash their hands because you got to do it for a while and you got to get into all those spots.
Use warm water, soap, rinse really, really well. And you do it multiple times actually as you're trying to cook. 20 seconds and with soap. It's a good idea to actually wash all the way up, especially because I have short sleeves on, so I'm washing all the way up to my elbows. So now that we've actually finished washing our hands, we are going to glove them. Every time you use a glove, it's actually better to wash them before you glove them. In case, for whatever reason, your glove tears midway when you're preparing. And you would change them very often. And when you change them is actually when you change fruits or vegetables.
Yeah, or going in between any different type of produce. It's always good to change them. Get them out of the way. And we're going to go right to what we're going to do.
So as I said before, we're going to be first starting out with a mango chutney. And the mango chutney recipe calls for not only mangoes, but some grated ginger, chopped
garlic,
and some
chopped onions. And we cheated by doing a lot ahead of time. Everybody does it a little different. There's no set rule for chopping onions and garlic. The trick is to go home with all the fingers that you came with, right?
Yep.
Some people do that. They smash it first so that the skin comes off way easier.
And he likes to use his hands. I actually use the back of a knife to do that. Or the flat side of the knife. And all I'm doing is actually taking the skin off of the ginger and using the knife to scrape it. You could do it different ways. You could use a peeler, peel the skins off. A lot of times you don't need the little knobs or whatever. We don't need a whole lot, so I'm not going to do a lot of it, but it leaves me enough room actually to hold on to it. And then we're using a microplaner. Some of these have handles, some of them are a little bit smaller. Use whatever you're comfortable with. All you want really in the mango chutney is the flavor of it. You don't want to necessarily bite into a big chunk of ginger unless that's really what you want to do. So the grating of the ginger is going to be very, very fine.
So everybody has different, there's a ton of different chutney recipes. In some cases, we'll juice a fruit like balimbi, or green star fruit, which is related, and they will we'll use those instead of vinegar because it's got about 6% acid, where vinegar is the standard white vinegar is 5% acid. So in the book for mango chutney, this is the basic recipe that we're going to follow. And this is from So Easy to Preserve from the University of Georgia. You can order it online from them. And this is the basics for all the master food preservers in every state in the country. All the recipes were checked by the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and they're all been proven safe. So this mango chutney calls for 11 cups or 4 pounds of chopped mango, which we have right here.
We've done it ahead of time so that we can speed up the process, but essentially you would just peel them, and if you can see, we've just cut them into very large chunks. Look at it, you'll see that there's some green and orange as well. And the green is because we are going to be cooking the chutney. And unless you want to come up with a mush or nothing that has like any kind of bite to it, you'll want to use the green ones, which will hold better under heat.
Most mango chutney recipes call for unripe mangoes. I like about 3/4 of the amount of mangoes used unripe and 1/4 of them ripe, because I still like that sweetness. I mean, you're adding vinegar and pepper to get a sour and a spicy hot flavor, but you can offset that with the amount of sweet ripe mangoes that you use. In Hawaii, we have a choice of a lot of different mango cultivars, so we can make it with Raposa or R2E2 or Maha Chinook or Mapalehu. Mapalehu mango chutney they make on Molokai is just amazing, but it's much sweeter than the average mango chutney or the major grays you would buy in any grocery store. So look for chutneys at farmers markets that are made by master food preservers around the state, and you can't go wrong. Better yet, learn this and make your own. So besides the mangoes, we're going to use golden raisins. I love golden raisins. You can use dark black raisins, but I'm kind of partial to the gold ones. We use some sugar, and we use some fresh ginger and garlic, of course, you saw, and 3 cups of white vinegar, and a little salt and chili powder. You know, we'll test the pH and we'll taste it, and then we'll probably add a little more chili powder, and then we'll probably add a little more chili powder, then we'll probably add a little more chili powder, then we'll
Depends on how
probably add a
spicy you
little more
really
chili
want it.
powder.
You can add other peppers as well too. And it's really all according to taste, but so long as you follow the basic general recipe. And there's, you know, little, as in any kind of recipe, tailor to you whatever you like. But there are some basic rules which we will be going through as we're cooking that you should follow, and you definitely need to follow. So to speed up the process a little bit, we actually had pre-cut some of the.
We could actually put everything in here.
I know. We've actually pre-cut the garlic, so we're just going to combine them together. We've done some ginger as well too.
This is the garlic, right?
Maybe let's prepare the jars first.
Okay, so we've got
We'll cover it back up.
mise en place, and got everything ready. But when you're making mango chutney, you got to have the jars ready. So what we're going to do is fill our pots and clean our jars and get them ready. Yeah, I'm just getting the jars ready for both the mango chutney and the marinara. And what we want to do is check each jar, make sure they're not cracked. We take the rings off and the lids, inspect those, put them off to the side, because we're gonna heat the lids until 180 degrees, not a full boil. Hence I have my thermometer here. Some people just wash the rings. I like to just dip them in boiling water. And we'll take the jars and get those, well, that water's boiling already. And we got one more that'll fit in here. And then we'll submerge them into the boiling water. And of course, some of them will float, so we got trusty tongs to make sure that things get down in there. We should have a couple inches of water over the tops of the jars, especially when they're filled. And then we'll bring that to a boil just to sterilize the jars. And you say this one is already boiling and ready. So we'll be able to take the jars out of here and place them off to the side while we cook. You go for it?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to start with 3 cups of white vinegar. I said in some cases we would distill the balimbi and use that. What are you going to put in? You're going to put in the onions.
Well, I don't want you to cry
Okay.
since you did that before.
I'm gonna, as long as you're here, we have our chopped up mango.
Yep.
Oh, I can cry from those onions, all right. Of course, we've got some ginger. Gotta have fresh grated Hawaiian ginger in there. Oh, I can smell that.
And garlic. What else are you
And
putting
my
in there?
favorite, golden
Ah.
raisins. Now there are lots of options with this. And some of those include substituting the vinegar with Balimbi. You can also substitute the sugar with up to 20% honey or agave syrup. Or you can use brown sugar. A lot of people like mango chutney with brown sugar. But you can only use up to 20% of sugar replacements. Boy, that's about the perfect levels of everything in there. Which I think you can see if I turn it a little.
Hot.
It's hot, and the thing is that it's really constant stirring so that it doesn't burn on the bottom. Because if you burn on the bottom, that's a problem. Now, some people, when they make mango chutney, they don't like it real lumpy, and they'll use a burr mixer or hand blender or whatever you want to call it. But I kind of like mine sort of chunky, so we'll just keep that off to the side for later, just in case. We'll go get some more goodies to add to this. So we're going to cook this down and get just a little bit before we throw the sugar in.
Ready?
Now let me make a, okay. Start with the chili powder.
Start with chili. And how much chili powder?
4 teaspoons.
4 teaspoons?
And we got to put a little salt in there. That's about 1.5.
So even though it's not quite ready, we're going to go ahead and still take the pH. Okay, so we're at right now,
Wow. We're great.
Yep.
So we're at 3.
we're at between 3 and 3.5.
We're perfect. But now we got to taste.
How is it? Tart?
Hot.
Spicy?
Spicy.
A little more than a little thick. The bottom is starting to getting very heavy.
Let's do the pH once more.
Okay. So we're almost there.
Yeah,
We're there.
we're there.
Exactly 3.0 or below if it doesn't
Yeah.
register.
We got it. So
We got it.
we're going to turn it off. Now we're going to move it over to the table and start jarring it up.
Okay, so we've sterilized the jars already. You saw us do that, as well as the lids and the rings. Ken's going to fill, and he's using a big ladle because it's pretty chunky. I'm going to be the one that's actually placing the lids on, wiping the rims,
And checking
head space, and placing the lids on and the rings
Take
on.
one of those out of there. Whoa. So generally people will take that hand blender or burr mixer and pulse it in there a little bit to break down the chunks. But being a fan of chunks and all these raisins and sauces at the bottom, I don't mind the chunks. I kind of like big chunks of mango. Okay, so now that we filled the mango chutney, Jane wiped the rings and the threads and the top of the jar carefully, and she tightened it. And then I always double check because I don't want it too tight, but we want it finger tight, just so it's got to create that seal in there. So once that's done, just load them into the canner. And we're going to give it a hot water bath for 20 minutes. Some recipes will say less and some will say more, but we like to do it for 20 and at least under 2 inches of boiling water. And we start counting the 20 minutes from once the water boils, not once we got it in there. So we'll get this going. Got a couple wide mouth jars, so it's easier for me to take a big spoon. That goes in and the lid goes on. And voila, now we just have to wait for it to boil and then start our 20-minute countdown. I always keep a towel underneath because that thing is hot and you don't know when it's going to slip out of the jar lifter. Boy, that looks good.
How many more minutes for the other
your
one?
Little pieces of red pepper in there. And big honking chunks of mango.
So the recipe that we use from So Easy to Preserve, the mango chutney, says it calls for about 6 pint jars. Well, clearly we have a little more than that, but we did follow the recipes. There's 2, 4, 6 pint jars here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 half pints, which is another 6 pints. You would have thought that we doubled the recipe. We actually didn't. But when all the ingredients are put together, then this is what it gives us. So when you're sanitizing your jars, always sanitize more, because the worst is that you're going to have essentially 12 half pints or 6 pints in this particular recipe left over, and what are you going to do with it if you don't have sanitized jars already? The last thing for these is just to let it cool down, and
it's vegan and gluten-free too.
and making sure that it has been canned properly. You will look for the indentation or non-indentation. You'll hear the plink as they cool down.
Okay, we're gonna prep for the marinara sauce now and start with the tree tomatoes or tamarillo. These are originally from Central and South America, and now they are very popular in New Zealand. They are kind of an orangish red like this, or a very dark red, or a very pretty color orange. They work as a sweet or as a savory. So they're extremely versatile fruits, and they're very easy to grow. Big, beautiful leaves. They're solanaceous, so they're actually related to tomatoes. But there's an endless amount you can do with it. So usually I try not to cut the glove, and I just cut it in half, and then she's gonna scoop it out. Almost said squirt it out. But
unlike the regular tomatoes that you're used to, the skin is actually not edible. So we're actually just going to be scooping the inside. Sometimes the orange part or the outer part can be a little bit bitter. It all depends on preference as well, but quite easy to scoop out.
And I'm not partial to the seeds. The seeds are larger and harder than tomato seeds, so I'm not a seed fan.
If you cut open a variety and it's quite dark on the inside, there's nothing wrong with the fruit, it's just a different variety. The ones that we're using is actually more on the orangey side. The flavor is probably a little bit sweeter than the red ones.
So we have, I think, three of these trees, and you can't really call them trees in the classic sense. They're large shrubs, but they're very leggy with large leaves, a little fuzzy.
And just
But
to
they'll have bunches of these things hanging on there.
and just to repeat, they are tamarillo, not to be confused with a tomatillo.
Tomatillo.
Oh, tomatillo. We're going to actually run it through juicer so we get rid of the seeds.
But yeah, that's my pet peeve, I guess.
And there we have it. So we will be adding that to the marinara along with the regular tomatoes.
Now we're going to switch. Jane's going to work with tomatoes. I'm going to get some herbs ready for the marinara sauce, but I'm going to change gloves because I went from the juicing the tree tomatoes, and which was a little wet, and the herbs, of course, are dry.
And I've rinsed my gloves. Now, in this case, it's actually acceptable because everything is going into the same recipe. But generally, you would change gloves, like Ken is, because he's going from wet to a dry. Also, he's using herbs. Mine is still, as I said, tomatoes. But all I'm really doing with the tomatoes is I've washed them, but we want to peel them. And again, this is a matter of preference, just like de-seeding the tamarillos. We're actually going to have blanched or peeled tomatoes. So we're going to take the tops off, core it a little bit, and then I'm going to squirt so that when we blanch them, or rather put them in hot water, just so that the skin peels back and we can peel it out easier, and then we could chop it up. And what are you doing with yours?
I'm just taking this is stick oregano. Oh boy, does that smell good. So,
and all I'm doing is just gently scoring it. It's a little excess just so that when it goes in hot water, the skin will peel back and it's easier to take the whole thing off. And I'm just taking the top off.
and I've got some bay leaves. Now the recipe calls
Oh, that
for,
really smells nice.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
The oregano. The recipe calls for 2 bay leaves. This is new growth that I took off my bay leaf tree yesterday. So the new growth is smaller, very potent leaves. So I'm just going to use a few little leaves in there. And we'll just let this dry for another recipe.
Now the recipe that Ken referred to earlier from So Easy to Preserve called for 11 pounds of tomatoes. We've actually combined we're combining the tamarillo along with these tomatoes. So we've accounted for weight for both of them to equal up to 11 pounds. You could do the same. You can mix match. Again, you know, it's very flavorful. It all depends on what flavors you want in there. As you was talking about adding herbs, fresh herbs, dry herbs, as much as you want, as little as you want. You don't like garlic, can't eat garlic, don't add garlic. If you want to saute onions as opposed to having just raw onions there, go ahead and saute it. These recipes are very, very flexible and according to really taste.
Because it all comes down to checking your pH. After you have everything mixed together and it warms up, you check it. And then when you think it's finished, you check it again. And as long as your pH 4.2 or below, or we like to have it 4, or even 3.5, this will give you an indication. Now, tree tomatoes we know have an acceptable pH, but on regular tomatoes, especially more ripe ones like these, they can be all over the place in terms of pH, from acidic, very acidic on unripe tomatoes, to very sweet and high sugar content on ripe tomatoes. I mean, this whole segment, and both of these fall under the category of acidified foods, acidified products, if you will. And that means the adding of acid in order to get a safe pH. So the jams and jellies don't fit in there, but chutneys, marinara sauce, tomato sauces, and salsas of any kind fit in that category. We have to add vinegar to ensure that the pH is 4.2 or below.
Yep. And if you can be
We're
working
going to
with
do that.
And if you be working with other fruits and making in this sort of type of style. Okay, so the next step then is we're actually going to we're going to start sanitizing the jars to get ready for
Canning.
and also make the recipes themselves. Okay, so we've scored the tomatoes earlier and all I'm doing is boiling water. We're just going to go ahead and quickly blanch them until the skins roll back. And by scoring them, it actually will make it a lot faster. We don't want to really cook the tomatoes, but it will take a little while for it to roll back. So, at a minute or so, depending on how hot the water is. And if the camera's seeing it, you can see some of it already starting to roll back. Okay, and that's what they kind of look like. Okay, so it's quite hot, so be careful as you pick them up with your gloved hands, but you can see how easy it is to come off. And that's really all we want to do is just really take the skin off. This top part, because of the core, it's a little harder, but just cut it. And because it's a marinara, we're going to be cooking it down essentially, just core it. Take all of the imperfections out. And when you're working with the tomatoes, the inside of it is actually still quite cool. It was really just the outside that was hot. And of course, this is your trash. And it's a very chunky cut because we're going to be cooking this down as we cook the marinara. You don't have to do this if you don't mind having skin in your marinara. All right, remember we chopped all the...
Ooh, it's hot.
Oh, chopped
Yeah.
all of the tomatoes here. I think you're going
You want me to pour it in?
to... Yeah, please.
Okay. These are all the tomatoes
Yep.
we're chopped up.
Okay, I'll take that.
Yep, but since that's on high, I'm going to turn this down just a little bit.
You got your ladle or your spoon?
Got my spoon.
The onions
Got
in?
those onions in there.
You want to
Pre-measured. Look at that. Yeah, dump them all in. Try not to get your hand with the spoon.
Okay, if you can hand me a small spoon from there. Thank you.
Now these are just the regular tomatoes, so we're gonna just get that down a little bit.
Garlic.
Woo!
Pretty potent. Okay.
And I should say the tomatoes and the onions are actually grown in Hawaii. So I'm going to use the hand blender to break up the chunks of tomatoes a little bit. Oh, this does a great job. Here comes the
Damarillo,
tamarillo.
cherry tomatoes. We're gonna put the whole thing in, right?
Sure.
Do you want to put
Without
the
the
other herbs in
spices.
there because you're gonna have to let it cook for a little bit?
Yeah.
Dry herb,
Well, we put the fresh ones in first.
okay. And we have,
Bay leaves
and
and oregano.
you want to put
fresh
the, wait,
oregano.
you measured everything, right? Or do
No,
you?
not at all. We do it to taste. Yeah, just dump it all in.
Okay. 2 teaspoons of pepper, how's that?
Yeah, and it was
1 teaspoon of salt. Okay. I'd rather we do that to taste.
Yeah, well, we will. We will taste it.
Sugar?
It uses just a tiny bit of sugar, so.
Well, remember, we're using tamarillo, so we may need more. So when it cooks down a little bit, we could taste it.
Yeah, we'll just put in a little in there to get it going. Get the red pepper. And then we can do to taste too once it cooks a little bit. And we should check pH now,
Okay?
just to see where we're at. So we still got a few tomato chunks in there.
It's okay. It'll cook down a little bit. You know, if you
Yeah.
have chunks in the marinara, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you put,
Preference. Ready?
right.
Okay. So before it's not quite cooked, but we'll know cooking won't change the pH too much. But it's actually 3.5.
Yep. Yeah, it needs to cook down without a doubt, but boy, the difference between this and plain tomatoes is pretty unique.
Oh, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, sure does.
All right.
Nice
Almost ready, right?
viscosity. Yeah, let's
So
check
let's
the.
check the pH again.
Yeah. Oh, I can tell from here it's perfect.
Oh, look at that. It barely changed color
Yeah.
from the original color of the paper. No,
Yep.
we're good. It's a
With
3.5.
That's perfect.
So acidity level is good.
Yeah.
No need to add anything else.
Nope.
And I
turn it off.
Yeah, and I bet you it's because of the tamarillo. Careful.
It just splatters a little bit.
Yeah, it's hot though. Okay.
Ready?
Yep. I'm ready. Half inch, don't forget.
So one of the nice things about marinara, this is like single serving or double serving size jars. So, oops, that got a little bit too.
You may have a little bit too much in there.
Yep. This is just so much easier than ladling it out.
Sure. So we're measuring the head spaces, and they fluctuate depending on your recipe, not necessarily by the size of the jar. What happens though is that it's the amount of space that you need between the lid and obviously whatever food that you're trying to can. That space is important to create the pressure when you water boil.
In this case, we'll be boiling 35 minutes because
Oh, yeah.
it's tomato. Some places they said the mango chutney should only be 15 minutes. We do it 20 minutes. We just, you can't really overcook it when it's boiling inside the jar. It creates the right amount of pressure. So now we got to put these into the canner for boiling. Okay, now 35 minutes. Well, here we are again at the end of mango chutney and marinara, tree tomato marinara day.
The key points that we wanted to emphasize for both recipes, the mango chutney as well as with the marinara, is that they are low acid food items. And that's why this was most important. This is the pH paper that we used.
Short range pH paper.
And the range that we use for most of our preserving is pH 3.0 to 5.5. You can get them for a range, you can get them in other ranges, but because we're usually targeting 4.2 with the products that we're doing for Hawaii, this is the most accurate. It gives us the most spread that we need.
You can also buy an expensive meter too, which we actually have, but
Correct.
the paper works just as well. And plus we also have this book, again, so easy to preserve that you can order direct from University of Georgia. It is the Bible for all home preservers and all master food preservers around the country. All the recipes have been tested. You follow the basic recipe, you can change the spices, you can add a little more sugar or a little more vinegar, but you can't always take away. So as long as you use the pH paper, if you alter your recipe too much one way, you may have to bring it back. If you need more acid, you can use vinegar, you can use lemon juice, you can even use diluted vitamin C, 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C diluted in water. That should give you a minor kick in the pH.
And if it's good pH, but it doesn't taste great in terms of it's a little too sour for yourself, add a little sugar. But again, just test it again and just make sure you're at 4.2 or under, and you're still good for preserving. The general rule is about 18 months shelf life with water bathing. That's the general rule. It's your discretion as to whether you want to go longer than that. But even then, you have to, when you're ready to eat that, you have to check to make sure that it's still pressurized. And this one has not been canned, so you can hear it.
And this one, nothing.
And so there's two phrases actually that we do teach. When in doubt, throw it out. And the other one's called FIFO or FIFO, first in, first out. So if you do a lot of preserving, and make sure you just keep it rotated, that the latest or the oldest thing that you've made is always in the front, so you eat it first. Every lid has, well, not every lid, most of the lids have spaces for you to put in the date. And that's what you should really do. You should label it as to what's in there, and then you should date it so you do know which one's first in, first out.
Which we will do.
Which we will do once the jars have cooled down.
Yep. It's even nicely divided.
So this is mine, right?
Yes.
Yay! I have marinara for dinner.
I have mango chutney for dinner.
Yeah.
Until next time. Cheers.
Cheers!